The lights died out, plunging the garage into complete darkness. 3 drunk men shoved her hard into the corner. One blocked the only exit. The tallest spat at her feet. "Please, I just need my car. Animals don't drive." He shoved her harder against the cold wall. His buddy dumped her bag onto the concrete. Wallet, keys, phone. He crushed the phone under his boot with a sickening crunch. "On your knees, homie. Pick it up like the dog you are." She gathered each item without a word. He grabbed her collar and pinned her to the wall. "Crawl out before I lose my patience." She stood, brushed the dust from her clothes, and smiled. What those men did not know was that the woman they had cornered in that dark garage had spent years training the most lethal soldiers on Earth. Sienna Harlan woke in the early morning hours, the same as every morning. No alarm. Her body had not needed one in years. She laced up her running shoes in the dark, stretched her calves against the porch railing, and ran several miles through the empty streets of Riverside, Memphis. Past the renovated lofts, past the new coffee shops with chalkboard menus and expensive lattes, past the craft brewery that used to be a tire warehouse where her uncle once worked. Riverside had changed. Years earlier, it had been a working-class neighborhood, mixed, modest, mostly black families who had lived there for generations. Then the developers came. Then the boutiques. Then the young white professionals with golden retrievers and noise complaints. One by one, the old families sold and left. Sienna stayed. She ran a small bike repair shop called Second Gear, tucked between a laundromat and a nail salon on Greer Street. The shop smelled of chain oil and rubber. She fixed flats, rebuilt derailleurs, trued wheels. The work was quiet, repetitive, precise. She liked that. It reminded her of field stripping a rifle, every piece in its place, every motion deliberate. What her customers never knew, what nobody in Riverside knew, was that Sienna Harlan had spent years inside Fort Bragg training Delta Force operators in close-quarters combat. Krav Maga, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, tactical hand-to-hand. She had designed combatives' curricula for Tier 1 units. She had sparred with men twice her size and put them on the ground before they could blink. She left the military in her early 30s after a torn rotator cuff ended her operational career. The Army offered her a desk. She chose Memphis instead. Chose silence. Chose a life where her hands fixed things instead of breaking them. There was a scar on her right forearm, 4 inches long, pale against her dark skin. She always wore long sleeves, even in the summer heat. When customers asked about it, she simply smiled and said she ran cold. Her neighbor, Mrs. Ellison, was the only person who treated her like she belonged. Elderly, white, a retired schoolteacher. She brought Sienna pound cake on Sundays and complained about her hip. She never asked where Sienna came from. She never asked why Sienna sometimes stood at the window in the dead of night, staring at nothing. The rest of Riverside was less welcoming. The woman at the dry cleaner counted change twice when Sienna paid. The man at the hardware store followed her through the aisles. Mothers pulled their children closer when she jogged past. Nobody said anything outright. They did not have to. Their eyes said enough. And then there was Jackson Crow, unemployed, son of Deputy Chief Harlan Crow of the Memphis Police Department. Jackson drove a black pickup with a Confederate flag bumper sticker and spent most evenings drinking with his 2 friends, Brody Lang and Tanner Voss, at a bar called the Wheelhouse on 5th Street. Jackson had a habit. Every few weeks he picked a target, always someone who could not fight back, always someone darker than him. He would follow them, taunt them, record it on his phone, and show it to his friends like a trophy. When one of his targets filed a complaint, the report disappeared. His father made sure of it. Jackson noticed Sienna the first week she moved in. A black woman, alone, quiet, running a little shop in his neighborhood. He did not like it. She thinks she belongs here, he told Brody one night, several beers deep. She doesn't. Brody laughed. Tanner raised his bottle. Sienna knew about Jackson. She had seen his truck circle her block. She had heard his voice in the parking lot late at night, loud and ugly. She knew the type. She had trained men who hunted men like Jackson in caves halfway across the world. But she said nothing. Did nothing. Because the whole point of leaving the army was to stop fighting. She did not know yet that some fights come looking for you, whether you want them or not. It started one evening. Sienna closed second gear, wiped down the workbench, locked the front door, and walked the several blocks home through the warm Memphis night. Crickets hummed in the hedges. The streetlights buzzed amber against the darkening sky. She cut through the parking garage on Elm Street. It was the shortest route. She had done it 100 times. Jackson Crow was leaning against a concrete pillar with Brody and Tanner, several six-packs deep, empty cans crushed around their feet like spent shell casings. Jackson saw her first. Well, well. He straightened up, blocked her path. There she is, the neighborhood stray. Sienna kept walking, eyes forward, hands at her sides. Hey, I'm talking to you. Jackson stepped closer. His voice echoed off the low ceiling. Are you deaf or just stupid? Probably both, right, boys? Brody laughed. Tanner pulled out his phone and started recording. You smell that? Jackson sniffed the air dramatically. That's the smell of someone who doesn't belong. Like mildew. Like rot. Like something that crawled in from the gutter. Sienna stopped. Excuse me, I'd like to pass. You'd like to pass? Jackson mimicked her voice in a high-pitched whine. Listen to her talking like she's people. He turned to Brody. Grab her bag. Brody snatched the strap off her shoulder, unzipped it, dumped everything onto the concrete. A wrench. A water bottle. Her wallet. Her keys. He kicked the keys across the floor. Fetch, Jackson said. Sienna looked at the keys, looked at Jackson. Then she knelt slowly and picked them up one by one. No expression, no trembling. Just precise, controlled movements. The kind of calm that did not come from weakness. Jackson did not recognize it. He saw submission. Good girl. He patted her head twice. Now get out of my garage before I make you crawl. She stood and walked past all three without a word. Her footsteps echoed down the ramp and into the night. When she got home, Sienna opened the hallway closet. Inside, behind winter coats she never wore, hung a faded olive green duffel bag with the Delta Force insignia stitched on the flap. She touched the canvas. Then she closed the door. But she did not lock it. The next morning, Sienna arrived at second gear to find a single word spray-painted across her front window in red block letters. The ugliest word in the English language. It dripped down the glass like a wound that would not close. She stood there for a long time. Then she went inside, filled a bucket with soapy water, and scrubbed it off before the first customer arrived. It took a long while. Her arms ached. The red never fully came out of the grout between the bricks. By midday, two of her regulars, white men who had been bringing their bikes to her for months, walked in, saw the faint stain on the glass, and walked right back out. They did not say a word. They did not have to. That week, her revenue dropped by half. Jackson Crow sat in the wheelhouse a few nights later, showing Brody and Tanner the video from the garage on his phone. He replayed the moment Sienna knelt to pick up her keys. He replayed it again and again. Look at her face, Jackson said, grinning. Not a damn thing. Like a robot. Like she doesn't even feel it. Maybe she doesn't, Brody said. Then we gotta try harder. Jackson flagged the bartender for another round. Daddy says don't leave marks. Use words. Words don't bruise. He tapped his temple. Smart. Tanner leaned in. What if she calls the cops? Jackson laughed so hard he spilled his beer. Calls the cops? My old man is the cops. Who's going to take her report? Officer Jenkins. He was at my birthday party last year. He wiped his mouth. She's got nobody. That's the whole point. Not long after, Sienna found a dead rat nailed to her shop door with a note stapled to its tail. Last warning. Leave, or next time it won't be a rat. She removed the nail with pliers, dropped the rat in the dumpster, and filed a report at the Riverside precinct. The officer at the desk, a thick-necked man named Sergeant Ellis Kane, typed slowly with 2 fingers, asked her to spell her last name 3 times, then said he would look into it. He never did. When she called to follow up, the report had been lost. Not deleted. Not rejected. Just lost, as if it had never existed. She filed another one. That one disappeared too. Mrs. Ellison brought pound cake that evening. She sat at Sienna's kitchen table and held her hand. Sweetheart, maybe it's time to go. Find somewhere safer. Sienna stared at the crack in her kitchen wall. If I leave, they win. And I've never run from anything in my life. I know. That's what worries me. In the middle of the night, a bottle crashed through Sienna's bedroom window. Glass exploded across her pillow. Cold air rushed in. Outside, tires screeched. Laughter faded into the dark. She swept the glass with bare feet on cold wood. A shard cut her soul. She did not feel it. She was too busy controlling her breathing. 4 counts in. 4 counts hold. 4 counts out. Box breathing. The technique she had taught soldiers before combat drops into hostile zones. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from restraint. Every fiber in her body wanted to chase that truck. Every synapse fired with years of trained response. Pursue, engage, neutralize. But she stood still, broom in hand, blood smearing the hardwood. She chose not to fight again. Jackson's father knew. Deputy Chief Harlan Crow sat in his home office the next evening, while Jackson bragged about the bottle through the window. Clean work, Harlan said, not looking up from his laptop. No prints. Gloves, like you taught me. Harlan nodded slowly. Good. Let her sweat. She'll pack up by the end of the month. They always do. And if she doesn't, Harlan looked at his son for the first time. Then we make her life so miserable she wishes she had. This was not rage. This was policy. The Crows did not see Sienna as a threat. They saw her as an inconvenience, a stain on their neighborhood. Same as the spray paint on her window. Something to scrub out. The next stretch of days was the worst. Someone slashed all 4 tires on every bicycle inside second gear. A dozen bikes. Nearly 50 slashes. Sienna spent hundreds of dollars on new tubes. Brody followed Sienna through the grocery store, filming her on his phone, narrating in a mock nature documentary voice. And here we observe the urban creature in its natural habitat, pretending to read labels. It probably can't understand. 3 people heard. Nobody intervened. Jackson and Tanner cornered her in the open parking lot behind the laundromat. Broad daylight. Pedestrians on the sidewalk. Still here? Jackson said, arms crossed, smiling. I gotta say, you're stubborn for your kind. I'm going home, Sienna said. Home. Jackson stepped closer. This ain't your home. You don't have a home. Not here. Not anywhere. He gestured at the street around them. Look around. Anybody helping you? Anybody care? Sienna looked. A woman across the street turned away. A man loading groceries into his car kept his eyes down. A teenager with earbuds walked past without slowing. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody cared. Jackson grinned. See? You're nothing here. You're invisible. You're less than invisible. You're a problem nobody wants to solve. Sienna said nothing. She walked home, locked the door, drew the curtains. Then she opened the closet. This time, she did not just touch the duffel bag. She pulled it out and unzipped it. Inside, her compression top, her training gloves, her mouth guard, and a laminated card with a Delta Force creed printed in small black letters. She read the creed once, twice. Her jaw tightened. She pulled on the gloves, made a fist, then another. The leather creaked against her knuckles like a language her body had never forgotten. Something shifted behind her eyes. Not anger, not revenge. Something older. Something trained into her bones across years and thousands of repetitions. Readiness. That night, Sienna called the only person who would understand. Sergeant Mara Quinn picked up on the second ring. They had not spoken in months, but Mara's voice landed like a hand on a shoulder. Steady. Warm. No questions first. Sienna told her everything. The spray paint. The rat. The bottle. The vanishing police reports. The son. The father. The system wrapped around them like armor. Mara was quiet for a long time. Sienna, you trained operators who took down terror cells in places most people can't find on a map. 3 drunk idiots in a parking garage. You could end it in seconds. A pause. But you do it stupid, they bury you. You do it smart, they bury themselves. The plan was simple. Sienna bought 3 small cameras, the kind that mounted with adhesive, the kind nobody noticed. 1 in the garage stairwell, 1 above the exit ramp, 1 in the corner where they had shoved her. She kept every note, photographed every slashed tire, screenshotted Brody's video, built a file. Dated, organized the way she had built after-action reports at Fort Bragg. Then she started training again. Alone at night, curtains drawn. Her body remembered everything. The trap was set. All she needed was for them to walk into it. One evening, Sienna closed second gear, turned the deadbolt, and walked the several blocks home the same way she always did. Through Elm Street, through the parking garage, past the concrete pillars and the flickering lights she had stopped trusting. She knew they would be there. She could smell the beer before she saw them. Jackson Crow leaned against the exit ramp barrier with a fresh bottle in his hand. Brody sat on the hood of someone else's car, legs dangling. Tanner crouched by the stairwell door, scrolling through his phone. All 3 looked up when her footsteps echoed across the concrete. No way. Jackson pushed off the barrier and spread his arms wide. She came back, boys. She actually came back. The 3 cameras Sienna had mounted were already recording, red indicator lights no bigger than a grain of rice. Silent. Patient. Waiting. Just like her. "Let me through, please." Jackson tilted his head. "Let me through, please," he repeated in a mocking falsetto. He looked at Brody. "You hear that? She said please, like she's people." He turned back to Sienna. "You're not people. You know what you are? You're a stain on this neighborhood, on this garage, on this whole damn street." He stepped closer. His shadow swallowed hers under the humming fluorescent bar. "You want to know the truth? Nobody wanted you here. Not the day you moved in. Not now. Not ever. Every person on this block wished you'd disappear. They're just too polite to say it. But me?" He tapped his chest. "I'm not polite." Brody hopped off the hood and circled behind her. Tanner stood, pocketed his phone, blocked the stairwell. 3 points of a triangle. Sienna at the center. She set her bag down slowly, placed it against the wall with the zipper facing out. "I'm asking one more time. Let me pass." The humor drained from Jackson's face. What replaced it was something uglier, something inherited, something his father had nurtured since childhood, like a poisonous vine. Or what? He flicked his bottle. Beer splashed across her face, dripped down her chin, soaked into her collar. "What's a dirty little black girl going to do about it? Huh? You gonna cry? You going to run? Call the police?" He laughed and looked at his friends for approval. "Baby, the police are on my side." Brody grabbed her arm from behind and shoved her hard into the corner. Her back hit the wall. The concrete was cold through her shirt. Tanner closed in from the left. 3 bodies between her and every way out. You know what I think? Jackson leaned in until his face was inches from hers. His breath reeked of cheap bourbon and chewing tobacco. His eyes were glassy and full of something worse than anger. Enjoyment. "I think tonight we teach you a real lesson about where you belong." He grabbed her collar with his left hand, twisted the fabric until it pressed against her throat, cocked his right fist back. Sienna's eyes changed, not a flinch. Something behind the iris shifted. A switch flipping in a machine that had been powered down for years. Her breathing slowed. Shoulders dropped half an inch. Weight settled into the balls of her feet. Her hands came up, not fists, open palms, relaxed fingers. A fighting stance that 99% of people would never recognize. "I warned you," she said. Quiet, almost gentle. 3 times. Jackson swung. He never connected. Sienna caught his wrist mid-arc. Her right hand locked under his elbow. She rotated. One sharp, surgical twist, and Jackson's arm hyperextended with a wet pop that echoed through the garage like a gunshot. He screamed. His knees buckled. She guided him face first into the concrete, pinned his twisted arm behind his back with 2 fingers and her body weight. His cheek scraped the oil-stained floor. His screams turned to whimpers. His legs kicked uselessly against the ground. 2 seconds. Brody charged from behind, boots scraping, breathing ragged. No technique, no plan. Just 200 pounds of blind momentum. Sienna released Jackson, pivoted on her left foot, and drove her right elbow straight into Brody's solar plexus. The impact folded him in half like a newspaper. Air left his lungs in one violent, wet gasp. He staggered backward, hit the pillar spine first, and slid down to the floor. His mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. 4 seconds. Tanner hesitated. That was his mistake. He grabbed a beer bottle by the neck and swung wide. A clumsy, panicked haymaker. Sienna ducked under the arc, swept his lead leg with a low kick at the exact angle they taught at Fort Bragg. 35 degrees. Inside edge. Maximum torque. Tanner's ankle folded. He crashed face down onto the oil-stained concrete. The bottle shattered beside his head. She stepped on his wrist, just enough pressure to pin, not to break, and kicked the broken glass away from his face. 7 seconds. 3 men. 7 seconds. Sienna Harlan stood in the center of the garage without a scratch. Not a hair out of place. Her breathing had not changed. Her hands hung loose at her sides, open the same way they had started. She picked up her bag, brushed the fleck of concrete dust off the strap, and slung it over her shoulder. Jackson lay cradling his arm. Tears and snot ran down his chin. "My dad," he gasped. "My dad's going to... You have no idea what's coming for you." Sienna looked down at him. She did not smile this time. "Tell your dad. Tell the news. Tell everyone." Her voice was flat, measured, terrifyingly calm. "And tell them I warned you 3 times. She stepped over Brody's legs and walked out of the garage into the warm Memphis night. What none of them knew, what Sienna had not planned for, was the witness. A young couple returning to their car on the 2nd level had heard the shouting and the slurs. The woman pressed record the moment Jackson grabbed Sienna's collar. She captured everything from a clear, elevated angle. Every word, every shove, every second of the fight. The audio was pristine. By the middle of the night, the video was on Twitter with the caption, 3 drunk men cornered a black woman in a parking garage. Watch what happens next. By the next morning, it had millions of views. By the day after that, the number stopped mattering. It was everywhere. The hashtag justice trended in 14 countries. Retired Marines analyzed the fight frame by frame on YouTube. Self-defense instructors broke down her technique in reaction videos. Women shared the clip with the caption, "This is what training looks like." Men shared it with, "Those guys are lucky she stopped at 7 seconds." But the reaction was not unanimous. Local stations ran the clip beside Sienna's DMV photo, deliberately unflattering. Under the chyron, military-trained woman assaults 3 local men in parking garage. Half the country called her a hero. The other half called her a threat. And in a wood-paneled office on the east side of Memphis, Deputy Chief Harlan Crow watched the video on mute. He watched it 3 times. His jaw tightened. He picked up his desk phone and called the district attorney's personal number. "I want her arrested," he said, "tonight." They came for her in the early morning. 2 squad cars, 4 officers. Blue lights pulsing across the front of her apartment like a heartbeat. Mrs. Ellison watched from behind her curtain across the hall, hand pressed to her mouth. Sienna opened the door before they knocked. She was already dressed, already calm. She held out her wrists without being asked. The charge: aggravated assault on 3 victims. The officers cuffed her in the doorway, walked her down the stairs, and put her in the back of a cruiser. One of them, a young officer she had never seen before, avoided eye contact the entire time. The other one did not. "Heard you like to fight," he said, adjusting the cuffs a notch tighter than necessary. "Let's see how tough you are now." By mid-morning, Sienna's mugshot was on every local news station in Memphis. The photo was stark, harsh fluorescent lighting. No makeup. Her expression flat and unreadable. The chyron beneath it read, "Former military woman charged with assault on 3 unarmed men. Not self-defense, not attacked by, assault on." The language was deliberate. Deputy Chief Harlan Crow had made 3 phone calls before breakfast. 1 to the district attorney, 1 to the news director at Channel 5, 1 to the editor of the Memphis Herald. By the time Sienna's booking was processed, the narrative had already been written. Channel 5 led with it at noon. The anchor, a polished blonde woman, with a concerned expression that never quite reached her eyes, read from the teleprompter. "A Memphis woman with military combat training is in custody tonight after allegedly attacking 3 local men in a parking garage. The victims say the assault was unprovoked." They showed Jackson's interview next. He sat in a hospital chair with his right arm in a sling, a butterfly bandage over his left eyebrow, and the practiced expression of a man who had been coached. His father stood just off camera. Sienna knew because she saw Harlan Crow's polished shoes at the edge of the frame in the raw footage that would surface later. "We were just hanging out," Jackson said, voice trembling with manufactured vulnerability. "Just talking, and she came at us out of nowhere. No warning, nothing." He winced, timed perfectly, and touched his sling. "I thought she was going to kill us. I really did." Brody and Tanner gave matching statements. Same phrases, same cadence, same lawyer. The internet, which had erupted in Sienna's favor only days earlier, split down the middle. The hashtag still trended, but now it competed with "Lock Her Up" and "Dangerous Woman." Cable news pundits argued in split-screen segments that generated more heat than light. One called her a hero. Another called her a ticking time bomb with a government-trained body. Nobody talked about the slurs. Nobody mentioned who cornered whom. The video was everywhere, but the framing around it had been carefully, surgically altered. Back in Memphis, the consequences stacked up like bricks in a wall. Sienna's landlord slid a 30-day eviction notice under her door. No reason given. Just, Violation of community standards. Second gear's front window was shattered overnight. This time, nobody bothered with spray paint. They threw a cinder block with a note rubber banded to it. Leave or burn. Her last 2 regular customers stopped coming. The laundromat owner next door asked her politely, apologetically, eyes on the floor, to stop parking her bike out front. "It's scaring people," he said. He did not say which people. Sienna sat in her empty shop that evening, surrounded by bikes she had fixed for people who no longer wanted to know her. The fluorescent tube above the workbench buzzed. A fly circled the ceiling. The silence was heavier than any punch she had ever taken. Then the phone rang. "Ms. Harlan, my name is Sterling Vaughn. I'm an attorney. I specialize in defending veterans who've been wrongfully charged. I saw your video." A pause. "All of it, including the parts the news isn't showing." Sterling Vaughn was in his mid-40s, silver-templed, and built like a man who had spent his 20s carrying a rucksack through places that did not appear on civilian maps. He had served years as a JAG officer, Judge Advocate General, before going into private practice. He had defended a dozen veterans in excessive force cases. He had won nearly all of them. He drove to Memphis from Nashville the next morning, sat across from Sienna in the visitation room at the county jail. She had been denied bail at Harlan Crow's recommendation, and opened a leather folder. "I'm going to be direct with you," he said. "They're not prosecuting you because you defended yourself. They're prosecuting you because you won, and because you're black, and because the man you beat is the deputy chief's son." Sienna said nothing. She looked at her hands on the metal table. "I've already pulled the full security footage from all 3 of your cameras. I've pulled the garage's own CCTV. I have 4 angles that show Jackson Crow initiating physical contact. I have audio of every racial slur." He leaned forward. "But that's not why I drove hours to get here." He slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were 4 police reports, or rather 4 complaint numbers with no reports attached. 4 separate incidents, 4 different victims. All black, all filed against Jackson Crow over the past few years, all marked closed, insufficient evidence by the same reviewing officer, Deputy Chief Harlan Crow. "His own father buried them," Sterling said. "Every single one." Sienna opened the folder, read the names, read the dates. Her jaw tightened. The last entry was a woman named Lila Brooks, a nursing student. Jackson had followed her home from a bar months earlier, grabbed her arm, called her things that Lila still could not repeat in the formal complaint she had tried to file. Harlan Crow had personally visited Lila's apartment the next day and suggested she reconsider her statement. She withdrew it that afternoon. Sterling closed the folder. "Lila called me yesterday. She's ready to testify. So are 2 of the others." He looked Sienna in the eye. "You're not the first woman Crow terrorized, but if we do this right, you'll be the last." Sienna sat very still. The fluorescent light hummed above them. Somewhere down the corridor, a steel door slammed shut. "When's the trial?" she asked. "In a few weeks." She nodded once. "I'll be ready." That night, alone in her cell, Sienna lay on the thin mattress and stared at the ceiling. She thought about the garage, about Jackson's face when his arm popped, about the look in his eyes. Not pain, but shock. The shock of a man who had never, not once in his entire life, faced a consequence. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she slept without dreaming out. The courtroom was standing room only. Every seat in courtroom 4B of the Shelby County Criminal Justice Center was taken well before the session was scheduled to begin. Reporters filled the first 2 rows. 3 sketch artists sat shoulder to shoulder near the jury box. Outside, a line of people stretched past the metal detectors and down the marble steps to the street. 2 news vans had their satellite dishes pointed at the Tennessee sky. Sienna walked in wearing a navy blazer, that Mara Quinn had brought to the jail the night before. Her hair was pulled back. Her hands were unshackled. Sterling had fought for that, and won. She sat beside him at the defense table, back straight, eyes forward. She did not look at Jackson. She did not look at Harlan Crow, who sat 3 rows behind the prosecution in a charcoal suit, arms crossed, jaw set like stone. The prosecution's attorney was Preston Hale, silver cufflinks, a reputation for never losing cases that involved law enforcement families. He spoke first. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Hale stood slowly, buttoning his jacket. "This case is not complicated. A woman with extensive military combat training, a woman trained by the United States government to incapacitate and kill, attacked 3 unarmed civilians in a parking garage. She broke one man's arm. She fractured another's ribs. She did this not because she was in danger, but because she could." He paused, let the word hang. "Because she wanted to." He turned to face Sienna. "Sienna Harlan is not a victim. She is a weapon, and weapons that cannot be controlled must be contained." The courtroom was silent. Hale sat down. Harlan Crow uncrossed his arms and nodded. A small, private gesture meant only for his son. Sterling Vaughn stood. He did not button his jacket. He did not pace. He walked to the center of the courtroom floor, stopped, and looked at the jury the way a teacher looks at a class before delivering the most important lesson of the semester. "The prosecution just called my client a weapon." His voice was calm, conversational, almost soft. "Let me show you what actually happened to this so-called weapon." He clicked the remote. The courtroom's mounted screens flickered to life. 4 camera angles appeared simultaneously, a quad split that showed the garage from every direction. Sterling played the footage in real time. No edits, no cuts, no narration. The courtroom watched Jackson Crow block Sienna's path. They heard the slurs. They watched Brody shove her into the corner. They saw Tanner block the exit. They heard Jackson say, "What's a dirty little black girl going to do about it?" They watched him splash beer in her face. They watched him grab her collar and cock his fist. And they watched Sienna warn him 3 times. "Let me through, please. I'm asking one more time. I warned you 3 times. Sterling paused the footage on the frame where Jackson's fist was mid-swing, aimed directly at Sienna's face. "That," Sterling said, pointing at the screen, "is the moment my client defended herself. Not before, not after, that exact moment. The prosecution wants you to believe she attacked 3 unarmed men. The footage shows 3 men who cornered a woman in a dark garage, called her an animal, splashed alcohol in her face, and threw the first punch." He lowered his hand. "Everything she did after that was survival." Hale objected. The judge overruled. Sterling called his first witness. Colonel Donovan Pierce, retired, decades in Army Special Operations, expert in close-quarters combat assessment. Pierce walked to the stand like a man who had testified in rooms far more dangerous than this one. "Colonel, you've reviewed the footage. In your professional opinion, did Ms. Harlan use excessive force?" Pierce did not hesitate. "No, sir. Every technique she employed was textbook defensive restraint. The wrist lock on the first attacker, the elbow strike to the second, the leg sweep on the third. All minimum necessary force responses to imminent physical threats." He looked at the jury. A trained Delta Force operator at full capacity could have caused permanent damage to all 3 men in under 5 seconds. Ms. Harlan chose not to. She used the least amount of force required to stop the attack. That's not aggression. That's discipline. Could she have killed them? Yes. Why didn't she? Because she's a professional. Professionals don't escalate. They resolve. The courtroom shifted. Jurors leaned forward. A woman in row 6 pressed her hand to her chest. Then, Sterling called Lila Brooks. Lila wore a white blouse buttoned to the collar and kept her hands folded in her lap. Her voice was steady, but her left knee bounced beneath the witness stand. She told them everything. The night Jackson followed her from the bar, the names he called her, the way he grabbed her arm hard enough to leave fingerprint bruises she photographed the next morning, the police report she filed, and the visit the next afternoon from Deputy Chief Harlan Crow himself. "He came to my apartment," Lila said. "He didn't threaten me, not exactly. He just said it would be better for everyone if I reconsidered my statement. He said things like this have a way of getting complicated. He said his son was a good kid having a bad night." Her voice cracked. Then he looked at my daughter's shoes by the door and said, "Nice place you've got here. I'd hate to see anything complicate your situation." A murmur ran through the courtroom like a current through water. Sterling introduced the complaint files. 4 victims, 4 buried reports, all black, all reviewed and closed by the same officer, Deputy Chief Harlan Crow. He displayed them on screen one after another. Dates, names, case numbers. The word "closed" stamped in red across each one. Then he played the final piece of evidence. Audio from a body camera that one of the arresting officers had forgotten to turn off during transport. On the recording, a voice later identified as Sergeant Ellis Kane from the Riverside Precinct said to his partner, "The chief wants this one handled fast. Make sure the report matches Jackson's statement, not hers. You know the drill." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged the gavel 3 times. Hale requested a recess. The judge denied it. Sterling turned to Jackson on the witness stand for cross-examination. Jackson had been sitting there watching his father's system disintegrate in real time. "Mr. Crow, did your father tell you that you were untouchable?" Jackson's attorney objected. Overruled. Jackson looked at his father in the gallery. Harlan Crow stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, giving nothing. "Mr. Crow, answer the question." Jackson swallowed. His Adam's apple bobbed. His eyes were wet. He said they'd never touch me. He said no matter what happened, he'd make it go away. His voice broke. He always made it go away. The jury deliberated for less than half an hour. Not guilty. Unanimous. The courtroom broke open like a dam. Cheering. Crying. Strangers hugging. Strangers. The sketch artist could not draw fast enough. Sienna sat perfectly still, her hands flat on the table. Tears ran down her face in 2 straight lines. Silent, the way soldiers cry. Without sound, without movement. Just water falling. Mara pushed through the gallery railing, wrapped her arms around Sienna from behind, and held on. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Sterling Vaughn closed his leather folder, clicked his pen, and smiled for the first time in weeks. The verdicts came down like dominoes. Jackson Crow was convicted of assault with a hate crime enhancement. 3 counts. The judge, a woman named Eloise Marlowe, who had presided over the bench for years and never once raised her voice, looked at Jackson for a long time before she spoke. "Mr. Crow, you cornered a woman in a dark place. You called her names designed to strip her of her humanity. You threw alcohol in her face. You grabbed her by the throat. And when she defended herself with extraordinary restraint, I might add, you called your father to make it disappear." She paused. 3 years. Federal custody. No early parole. Jackson's mother sobbed in the gallery. Jackson stood with his hands cuffed in front of him, staring at the floor. He did not look at Sienna. He could not. Brody Lang received 18 months for accessory to assault and filing a false police report. Tanner Voss received the same. Neither spoke during sentencing. Neither had anything left to say. But the real earthquake was Harlan Crow. The FBI had opened a formal investigation days into the trial. What they found went far beyond Jackson. Over more than a decade as deputy chief, Harlan Crow had buried 14 complaints, all involving victims of color. He had reassigned officers who pushed back. He had promoted those who cooperated. He had built a system, quiet, efficient, invisible, that protected his son and people like his son at the expense of everyone who looked like Sienna. The federal indictment landed weeks after the trial. Obstruction of justice, conspiracy to violate civil rights, destruction of evidence, abuse of authority. Harlan Crow was arrested at his home one morning, walked out in handcuffs past the same reporters who had once aired his son's rehearsed interview without question. He faced up to 15 years in federal prison. Preston Hale, the attorney who had called Sienna a weapon, was referred to the Tennessee Board of Professional Responsibility for ethics violations. An internal review revealed that Hale had knowingly suppressed evidence provided by the defense during discovery. His license was suspended pending investigation. His firm issued a statement calling it a personnel matter. Nobody believed them. Sergeant Ellis Kane, the officer who had processed Sienna's vanishing police reports, was terminated. The body camera audio, the one his partner had forgotten to turn off, was played on national television. Make sure the report matches Jackson's statement, not hers. You know the drill. That sentence became its own hashtag. Hashtag, you know the drill. It trended for days. Hashtag, justice for Sienna crossed tens of millions of views across all platforms. The Washington Post ran a front-page profile under the headline, "The Woman Who Fought Back and Won." The New York Times editorial board published a piece titled, "When Self-Defense Becomes a Crime: The Sienna Harlan Case and the System That Failed Her." Sienna declined every interview request, every book deal, every documentary pitch, every talk show invitation. She said the same thing to each one. "I'm not a story, I'm a person, and I've got work to do." She used the community donations, hundreds of thousands of dollars raised through a GoFundMe that Mara Quinn had set up during the trial, to lease a warehouse 3 blocks from where Second Gear used to be. She gutted it, installed mats, hung heavy bags, mounted mirrors along the walls, painted the front door olive green, the same shade as her old military duffel. She called it Iron Will Defense Center. Free classes every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday evening. Open to women of all ages, all backgrounds, with priority enrollment for women of color and underserved communities. The first class had 30 students. They stood in 3 rows of 10, nervous, unsure, some of them holding their car keys between their fingers because it was the only self-defense technique they had ever been taught. Sienna stood in front of them. For the first time since leaving the Army, she wore a short-sleeved shirt. The scar on her right forearm, 4 inches long, pale against her dark skin, was visible to everyone. "I'm not here to teach you to fight," she said. "I'm here to teach you that you're worth defending." Nobody spoke. A woman in the back row wiped her eyes, and the lesson began. A year later, Iron Will Defense Center had branches in 5 states: Memphis, Atlanta, Chicago, Houston, Philadelphia. Each one painted the same olive green. Each one free. Each one run by women who had once stood where Sienna's first students stood, nervous, unsure, holding their car keys like tiny swords. Sienna was invited to speak at West Point. She stood at the podium in the hall facing 300 cadets in gray uniforms. Behind her, the screen showed a single photograph. Not the garage, not the courtroom, not the viral clip. It was a picture of Second Gear, the little bike shop on Greer Street, with the faded awning and the grease-stained workbench. "People ask me what my greatest fight was," she said. "They expect me to say the garage or the trial." She shook her head. "My greatest fight was waking up every morning in a neighborhood that didn't want me, opening a shop that people avoided, and choosing every single day not to become the thing they accused me of being. The cadets did not clap right away. The silence lasted several full seconds. Then it broke, not into applause, but into something closer to recognition. The sound of 300 people understanding something they had not understood before. Back in Memphis, Riverside had changed again. Not the buildings, not the coffee shops or the lofts. The people. The laundromat owner who had asked Sienna to stop parking out front was one of the first to donate to Iron Will. He did not say much. He just handed her an envelope with $300 inside and a note that said, "I should have said something. I'm sorry." Mrs. Ellison came to every Tuesday class. She never trained. She sat in a folding chair by the water cooler with a tin of pound cake on her lap and cheered like she was courtside at a championship game. When new students looked nervous, she would wave them over and say, "Honey, if I can sit here at my age, you can stand up at whatever age you are." Lila Brooks enrolled in the Saturday class. She brought her daughter. The little girl was 5 years old, and she threw punches at the heavy bag with both fists, laughing every time it swung back. Lila watched her from the edge of the mat. She did not cry. She had done enough of that. But she smiled, the kind of smile that only comes after something very heavy has finally been set down. The garage on Elm Street was demolished months after the trial. The city council voted unanimously to convert the lot into a community park. They asked Sienna to suggest a name. She thought about it for days. She named it Second Chance Park. On the evening it opened, Sienna stood at the edge of the lot where the corner used to be. The corner where Jackson had shoved her. The corner where 3 cameras had recorded 7 seconds that changed her life. There was grass now, a bench, a small oak tree that would not give real shade for years. She touched the bark, rough, young, alive. Behind her, the Iron Will evening class was starting. Through the open warehouse door, she could hear the rhythm of gloves hitting pads, the counting, the breathing, the sound of women learning that their bodies were not things to be ashamed of, but instruments to be trusted. Sienna turned away from the tree and walked toward the sound. She had work to do. What would you have done in that garage if 3 strangers cornered you in the dark, called you less than human, and raised a fist? What would you have done? Drop a comment. Tell me. Because I think the answer says more about who we are than we would like to admit. If this story hit you somewhere real, share it. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. Hit the bell. Because stories like Sienna's happen every single day, and they deserve to be told. Okay, real talk. This one hit different. A woman gets cornered in a dark garage by 3 men, and everybody just looks away. That's why I told this story. Because Sienna didn't wait for a hero. She became one. And honestly, that's the most powerful thing I've ever heard.